good day and welcome everyone to this NERPS and ITech Institute webinar. This event also marks UNESCO's celebration of the World Science Day for Peace and Development 2025. This year's theme is Trust, Transformation, and Tomorrow, the science we need for 2050. So NERPS is the Network for Education and Research on Peace and Sustainability based at Hiroshima University. And IDEC is also an institute of Hiroshima University dedicated to interdisciplinary and international research. I am Leticia dos Muchangos, specially appointed associate professor at IDEC and also a core member of NERPS. We are pleased to have Dr. Leary for a conversation on advancing local climate resilience through university and community partnerships. And before we start, I will briefly introduce Dr. Leary. Dr. Leary has a PhD in economics from the University of Washington in the USA, in Seattle, USA. Is the founding director of the Center for Sustainability Education at Dickinson College in the USA also. And he supports faculty members in developing sustainability courses and offers diverse co-curricular programs for experiential learning. Dr. Leary also teaches classes on climate change risks and resilience, sustainable communities, and campus sustainability, and has taken students to UN Climate Conference for research on climate governance. So he leads now the Building Climate Resilience at Dickinson College and in South Central Pennsylvania, a joint initiative of the college and communities of Cumberland County, and Neil has held leadership roles in climate change assessments of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and START International, including hundreds of researchers, policymakers, and practitioners from 80 plus countries. So thank you, Dr. Nerley. So we will have about 40 minutes of his presentation, followed by a Q&A and discussion. And without further ado, welcome, and the floor is yours, Neil.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Muchangos, Leticia, for inviting me and for the introduction. And thank you to everybody in the audience who's taking some time to listen to what I have to say. I hope that you're going to find it pertinent and useful. Here, let me move to share my presentation. So, the topic for today is about advancing climate resilience and doing this through partnerships between universities and communities. I think, I'll take it as a given for the audience listening in that we agree that climate action is necessary, it's urgent, and that, we don't need to convince each other of that. Climate action typically, most things that we can think of doing fall into either, mitigation or adaptation as sort of broad areas of action. I'll be focusing on the adaptation side, but in particular, an approach to adaptation of resilience or resilience building, which is, I like to think of it, describe it as taking sort of a more systems approach, capacity building approach to adaptation. So let's start off with, what is climate resilience? Let's make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So there's a number of definitions that are used. This is one that resonates with me. Most definitions are pretty similar. Basic idea here is that climate resilience is a capacity. It's a capacity to manage, deal with, respond to climate hazards, climate change, enabling the actor, whether it's an individual or a community, to be able to limit the harm that they suffer, be able to recover quickly, be able to get back to what they were before, and maybe even to sort of use opportunities to thrive and improve their situations. In thinking about sort of building climate resilient communities, what this amounts to then is it's about increasing capacities. capacities of people, organizations, communities to be able to act. And it's also very much giving priority to those who are highly vulnerable, disadvantaged, and marginalized, and making sure that they have the capacities, the resources, the wherewithal to be able to take action to protect themselves from the harms of climate change and climate hazards. So maybe let's take a moment, since, in thinking about, this question of, like, well, why connect communities and universities on this area of, climate action and solutions? So, first off, communities are an important nexus for climate action. Right. So climate action is happening from very local scales to national, international, and global, but communities are a very important place for action to happen. They play an important role because that's where the knowledge of local priorities, resources, needs, processes, where that resides, and that is important and necessary for effective action. Communities have the power to convene people, to plan, to mobilize, to act. But they can oftentimes lack technical knowledge, technical expertise, staffing, and the capacity for effective action. Universities also are an important nexus for climate action. And some of the things that they bring to the table is they have technical expertise and knowledge of their faculty members, researchers, students. These are places of research and innovation. They can be places where they can demonstrate successful and effective strategies. But some of their limitations are lacking. They may lack knowledge of the community. They may lack trust in the community. They might not have the relationships with community partners, community stakeholders for effective action. So working together, communities and universities can be stronger together. When we think about what are the benefits of, for communities to participate, to engage with higher education on climate action. It provides them access, to knowledge, expertise, and people who can help the community to advance goals. It provides an opportunity also for stakeholders in the community to add to their knowledge and add to their skills. So there's a benefit in that regard. Students can benefit very strongly from experiential learning hard skills and soft skills. It can strengthen also their propensity to become engaged in civic matters and community matters. Faculty benefit as well. Faculty are motivated by doing impactful research and impactful teaching, things that matter. So this can be a benefit to faculty in that form. It can help them advance their skills for cross-disciplinary work. Also important, I've learned this over the years at Dickinson College, is, what are the benefits for the institution? One of them is it can deepen connections with communities. How successful, how effective our college is, how other colleges and universities are, is very much influenced by the relationships, good or bad, with the communities in which they're located. Doing this kind of work can strengthen the reputation of an institution, and doing that can improve the ability to recruit and retain students, faculty, and staff. So that gives you sort of a sense of, why I think this is an important area for collaboration, of connecting communities and universities on climate action. The specific initiative project that I'm going to talk about is building climate resilience at Dickinson and in central Pennsylvania. Let me grab my notes here. Take a look. So, we began on this initiative with a faculty resolution that was put forward for a faculty vote for the college to begin to take action to adapt to climate change and to sign what's called the Resilience Commitment of Second Nature. That resolution was passed by the faculty. It went to the president of the college, who signed it back in December of 2022. And in signing it, what he did was this committed Dickinson to taking a set of actions under the Second Nature resilience commitment. I'll just say a little bit about Second Nature. So Second Nature is an organization that consists of many members who are colleges, universities, mostly in the United States. There's some in Canada, some in Mexico, some in other parts of the world, but it's mostly a US-based network or consortium of schools. Back in 2007, I believe it was, they launched a commitment that they invited colleges and universities to participate in that's now called the Carbon Commitment. That was about taking actions to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in higher education. Several years later, Second Nature added a new commitment in response to the interest of its members for taking action also on resilience, on adaptation. An interesting difference between the resilience commitment and the previous carbon commitment is that the resilience commitment calls on us in higher education to work with community partners. That this isn't something for us to do on our own, to do alone, but it's a joint effort to work with the communities in which we're located. So there are about 100 other colleges and universities that have signed on to this and are working with their communities. It's lower than the carbon commitment, I think, has close to 700, maybe more than 700 participants. So this is getting less traction, less attention, but I'm hoping that's going to grow over time. What it calls on us to do is working with, engaging with our communities here in Cumberland County in Pennsylvania, in the U.S., is to assess our exposures to climate hazards and climate change, evaluate what vulnerabilities we have for negative impacts, look at what our strengths are, what our sources of assets for building resilience, and also what are our weaknesses that can undermine or become obstacles to building resilience. It also calls on us to look at, identify, evaluate, and prioritize strategies for building resilience. Developing, adopting, and implementing plans of action to act on the information that we develop, and then to monitor and evaluate and report on the progress as we move forward. Just to give you a sense of the place where we're doing this work. So this is a view from Blue Mountain, looking southward across Cumberland Valley. You can see that this is a mosaic of rural and urban spaces. Carlisle, the borough, it's a small city of 20,000 people, is up on the upper kind of left side. You can see some development there. So this is an area where the largest land use is agriculture. It's roughly about half the land use is for that purpose. It's a place where, I'll show where it's located if you're not familiar with the geography here. So we're in the state of Pennsylvania in northeastern United States. You can see Pennsylvania outlined in gray. And within that, the yellow area, shaded area, that's Cumberland County, which lies in the Great Valley or the Cumberland Valley in this region. It's an area in which it's about 550 square miles, a population about a quarter million people. In addition to agriculture, we have healthcare services are important, retail trade, logistics, warehousing, trucking is a large activity here, public agencies, professional services. And we're the fastest growing county in Pennsylvania. So we're not, one of the largest in terms of population or economic activity, but we've been the fastest growing for quite some time. One of the things that's going to come with that, it looks very likely that we are going to be a site for development of data centers not too long in the future. So the Resilience Initiative, this gives you a picture here of, the general approach. We're following a 5-step process called the Steps to Resilience that comes from the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. We're also using some resources and tools and guidance from Second Nature to do this work. Um, and I'll move on in the interest of time to give you some background of this kind of work where you're working with community partners. You need to be taking time to do this carefully, do it well, building relationships over time. So Dickinson College has been working with the borough of Carlisle and with the county of Cumberland on climate change, climate action issues going back almost 10 years. We had a group of students working with the borough using the City Resilience Index of the Rockefeller Foundation to evaluate resilience to climate and other stresses and pressures here. That was back in 2016. We've done a variety of community action projects through courses that have engaged our students that led to a set of resilience dialogues that were facilitated by representatives of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. That led to a variety of interesting things happening in our area that I'll come to later. The next set of activities were in 2019 and 2020. The state of Pennsylvania launched a program called Local Climate Action Program, in which they tried to partner colleges and universities with their local communities to develop a greenhouse gas inventory for the community and work on climate action plans. And so I worked with students doing that both for Carlisle and then the next year for Cumberland County. And so there have been a series of these activities leading to the current activity on building climate resilience. Doing this kind of community engagement work, what we've been doing is, starting off with initial consultations at the beginning of the project with the county planning department, with the Carlisle Borough Manager's Office. We put together a working group to guide this initiative. We've had a series of open meetings, workshops, focus groups, surveys that we've done. We have a website for the initiative where we publish the reports that are produced. Many of them are produced by students. We have an electronic newsletter that has almost 400 subscribers. And the community also engages through by being participants in community-based research courses and other service learning activities that we do at Dickinson. So on, community-based research courses is something that I use. It's a pedagogy that I use in my teaching in many cases. Specifically for this initiative, we have a program called the Baird Sustainability Fellows Program, for which the students in that, they take an advanced sustainability practicum course that I teach. In fall 2023, the students in the program that year did a semester-long research project with the county, looking at what are the climate risks, what's our climate resilience in the area. And I'll be talking about results, findings from that work. And then the following year, a new cohort of Baird Sustainability Fellows did the same kind of thing, but focusing on Dickinson College. So these community-based research courses, they use a pedagogy that's part of a family of pedagogies called community engaged learning. And in these, community engaged learning, one of the things that makes it effective is you're involving your students with community partners to address authentic problems that are messy, problems that matter to the community. That can really help to motivate the students who are involved in this, so that they're not just working on an academic assignment which nobody but their professor is paying attention to, but they're actually trying to do something that's a service to the community, and they're being held accountable to the community. So that both is motivating and strikes a little bit of fear into them as well, to encourage them to give their best effort. What comes out of doing this kind of pedagogy, this kind of teaching, is it really supports in a very strong way development of critical thinking skills for students, being able to evaluate information, different information sources, being able to synthesize information from different sources, different disciplines, being able to deal with and navigate uncertainty. being able to think about how one applies ethics and values to making decisions, and becoming, better overall in trying to apply knowledge, information to solving problems. It's an approach that also is very good for building what are called change agent skills, which can include being able to collaborate, work with other people towards shared ends, and it builds abilities and dispositions to be able to act as a responsible member of a community. So I'll get now to some of our results and findings from the work. So in order to build resilience to climate change, climate hazards, you need to have some notion, some sense of how the climate is going to change in the future. What is in store for us? Well, the future, of course, is uncertain. We can have some fairly good ideas about some aspects of how things may evolve and change over time, but other things there will be significant uncertainty about. So we, in developing scenarios for looking at climate risks in our county, a lot of this, made use of a set of climate change projections that came from 32 climate models that were being used for the U.S. Global Change Research Program's National Climate Assessment. So we obtained that data where they have it downscaled to the county level. And so we use that information in our analysis. And we combined that also with more general, broader, qualitative descriptions of how the climate might change in the northeastern United States or the continental United States that were available from the National Climate Assessments, from the IPCC, and also from the Pennsylvania Climate Impacts Assessment. This diagram, this figure gives you, one set of projections for one set of variables that is very much of interest. This is the number of days per year above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It shows, for different time periods of the near term, 2016 to 2035, looking out to mid-century, 2046 to 2065, and then late century, 2076 to 2095, looking at the range of projections from those 32 climate models of the number of days that would exceed 90 degrees Fahrenheit on average per year. And you see on the black line shows the historic average is below 7 days per year. And so you can see that there's quite, a substantial increase projected in how many days per year we're going to see above 90 degrees. So going from less than 7 per year by mid-century, somewhere from 23 to 53 days. The ranges reflect a 10th percentile and 90th percentile from those 32 climate model projections. So this gives you a bit of a flavor of the climate data that we were working with. Thinking about sort of, more broadly beyond just these hot days. What do we know with near certainty? What do we know as with maybe less certainty, but it's still likely outcomes? Nearly certain is that average temperatures are going to rise over whatever future time frame we're talking about. Not as certain, but still very likely, would be that heat waves will become more severe and more frequent. We'll be seeing that cold spells will, sort of the corollary of that, they'll be less severe and less frequent. Average annual rainfall likely will increase, or very likely will increase in our area. It's likely, so a little bit less confidence in this, but it's likely that heavy rain events will be more frequent and will have greater rainfall amounts. And then potentially, where these are things which are plausible. They have some likelihood, but hard to measure that likelihood of them occurring. But it seems that we could experience here in Cumberland County more frequent and severe droughts, floods, storms, and compound events. So basically what we're looking at is there's a wide range of conditions that we might be facing, and what we need to be thinking about is preparing for a range of future climates and not trying to respond to specific predictions from a model or a small number of models, and be thinking about sort of the wide range of things. If it's going to be hotter on average, we very likely will have more extreme heat events. We could have periods that are both wetter and other periods that are drier. More frequent and intense heavy rain events and whatnot. So we need to be thinking about strategies that are going to be robust across a wide range of possible futures. And be thinking about taking sort of a resilience capacity building approach rather than focusing on individual strategies. This figure here is something which, if you get a hold of the slides, you'll be able to read it later. This is just an example of one of the communication tools that we produced in order to share information with members of our community about how are risks changing in our area and some of the different strategies that are available to respond to it. Some of the things that we learned from the community through the research that I and my students have done. So risks of concern that emerged as being of particular salience, particular interest to our community are the effects of extreme heat-related illnesses. That was probably the one that seemed to get the most attention, concern voiced from members of the community. Related to that, air quality concerns. Air quality is a problem, an issue where we are in Cumberland Valley, and there's concern about air quality being degraded from global climate change. Some of the other things that emerge as concern are impacts on the environment. In particular, we've got some wonderful streams in our area that support trout fisheries, water recreational sports, and so there's a lot of concern about how those will be impacted. In terms of infrastructure, there's a great deal of concern about how services like electric power and telecommunications, the potential for them to be disrupted more frequently and for longer periods of time being something that we want to be paying attention to. On the economy, a wide range of concerns, but particular interest here in what this will mean for the farmers, for the farming community, for rural communities. On this slide, you can also see, as part of the assessment process, trying to identify what are the strengths, what are some of the assets that we have to draw on in order to manage the risks from climate hazards. We're fortunate to have a resilient, diverse local economy. We've got highly skilled workforce. That the median income here is high relative to other counties in Pennsylvania. Typically lower unemployment rates here than other counties, a lower poverty rate here than in other counties. We also are fortunate to have some community organizations, a very vibrant civil society sector, organizations that have a history of working with each other on a variety of community concerns. And so there's some other strengths there, which I won't go into at this point, but we can talk about in the Q&A if you're interested. Weaknesses, that while we have a relatively strong, robust economy here, there are inequalities, inequities. There are people who live in poverty, people who don't have access to health care. I think it's something like 7 to 8% of our population lacks health insurance. Food insecurity, that close to 20% of people in the county are food insecure. The poverty rate is around 7%, I believe. So these are all issues that we need to pay attention to as we think about how climate change is going to affect us and how we need to respond. Housing cost burdens is a big issue. About 3/4 of the population in our county is housing cost burdened. That means that their housing costs are 30% or more of their incomes. Threats that we're dealing with here, that in addition to climate change, there's a lot of land development pressures. I mentioned the data centers. That's a big concern. Growing concern about social and political divisions, and also about declining federal resources and assistance in the area. All right. So thinking about, what are some of the strategies, approaches that we can take to respond to the risks, the potential impacts that are of concern to people who live here in Cumberland County. You see here, the strategies that resonated with our community are ones that, there are 8 different categories that most of the different strategies kind of fall into these different areas. One that, emerged as being really very critically important is building social capital. That's a strategy that pays dividends in multiple ways. So, building social capital is, important in not just providing resilience to climate change, but also resilience to other natural hazards, different kinds of natural disasters. It provides resilience to economic disruptions, to technology change, civil unrest, mass violence. So building social capital, I imagine that for an institute that is focused on peace building, that is a concept that is very much part of the work that you do and the scholarship that you do. You know, Another aspect that emerged as really important in our discussions with the community is, equity and protecting vulnerable people. That those were things that were very frequently mentioned in workshops and meetings that we had with our community stakeholders. Coming out of this was an important recognition of the important roles that are played by existing safety nets, social safety nets, and policies for our community. The basic idea here is that people who are lacking in resources, assets, they have limited means of being able to manage, cope with, deal with the effects of climate hazards, climate extremes, weather extremes, and so consequently, they have they're highly vulnerable. They have diminished resilience. In contrast, households that have adequate resources, access to different services, they have the means, they have some capacities for being able to cope with and deal with the effects of an extreme climate event, and so they will have more resilience than households that lack those assets. So, some specific programs that we talked about in our conversations as being important. We have a program in the United States called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. SNAP is the acronym for it. More commonly, it's called food stamps. That's an important program that addresses food insecurity in our communities. Health insurance through the Affordable Care Act dramatically increased the number of people who have access to health insurance, and through health insurance, access to health care. Programs for vouchers for housing assistance to assist those families, those households that are struggling with housing costs. Other programs that are providing assistance, support to help people pay for energy bills, other utility bills. So these are all programs that we recognize through this process are actually, maintaining those programs and enhancing those programs are a strategy for building resilience to climate hazards and climate change. Sadly, if you've been following the news in the United States, these are programs that are very much uncertain. Funding is being pulled back on them. Participation rates are potentially going to be going down, and so that's emerged as a major concern here. So I want to just kind of share. So I showed the slide earlier showing some of the previous activities that we've done with Carlisle and Cumberland County on that have been climate change related. And there have been a number of outcomes that have arisen out of these. So in 2019, coming out of some of the work that we did with the City Resilience Index and the Resilience Dialogues with the U.S. Global Change Research Program, that Carlisle, when they updated its comprehensive plan, have included a whole section on resilience. Resilience to a wide range of different kinds of pressures, shocks that people may have to deal with, but climate pressures being one of them. In 2020, the county did an update to its hazard mitigation plan. And for the first time, this is a result of work that students in one of my courses did, prompted this action of climate change was explicitly addressed in the hazard mitigation plan and discussed it at some length as to its implications for how we protect ourselves against different kinds of hazards. In 2021, coming out of the Pennsylvania local climate action program, our work with Carlisle and with the county led to both of them adopting climate change mitigation plans. So they have in place plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then more recently, and these are coming out of some early outcomes from the Climate Resilience Initiative, the county did an update of its comprehensive plan in 2024, and climate resilience and other forms of resilience are for the first time part of the comprehensive plan for the county. The county also did another update to its, they have to do an update every 5 years to its hazard mitigation plan, and climate change is dealt with in an expanded way. For the first time, extreme heat events are one of the hazards that is explicitly discussed in needing to be managed, is in the hazard mitigation plan. Also, a section on social vulnerability, looking at the social and economic determinants of who is at risk, who's vulnerable to natural disasters of varying kinds, but also climate change. So I just want to share then also, these are some of the resources that we worked with and are working with on this initiative. These are resources that are U.S. based and focused. No doubt there are resources that are available internationally for the places that NERPS does its work. So you might look for similar resources elsewhere. But Second Nature has a variety of guidance documents, resources to help participants in the resilience commitment figure out how to work effectively with communities, how to do a resilience assessment, tools for thinking about planning for resilience and evaluating strategies. There's also an important set of tools from the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. This is still a program of the federal government that is still alive and still going. I hope that continues. It has recently been improved, that it's a resource that's been available for over a decade. It had always been kind of a grab bag of uncurated resources that could be useful, but it was hard to figure out what different tools did, what were they appropriate for, what was actually the most useful, most effective to use. They've done a lot of work on curating the resources that they've put together. Of particular use are case studies looking at places that typically these are places that have done programs with NOAA on coastal resilience and learning from their successes and what they did. There's a database of different options for building resilience, for adapting, and so that's a good place to go for things. The GEOS Institute is another organization that provides resources that can be very helpful to communities that are navigating this path. Trying to be aware of the time here. And so one of the things that Professor Muchangos, as we were planning this event, she was emphasizing for me is that peace is a major focus of NERPS, and that I should do what I can to try and make some connections with between this climate resilience work that we're doing and peace building. I'll ask your indulgence in case I am very naive or say things that are off the mark. This is not my area of expertise, and I imagine that in the audience are folks who know a good deal about this. I will say I did my homework after talking with Letitia and read a few resources. One of which I found is by Florian Crampe and others that I found a very intriguing, useful, informative piece on climate change and peace building, looking at the research agenda in those. And so I found that article was resonated with me, particularly work that I had done in the 2000s with START International, where I was leading a program to assess climate change adaptation impacts, vulnerabilities in the global South, and we had 24 teams of researchers and practitioners involved in that study. And so that work, more than the work that I've done locally in Cumberland County, that work is where I see more of the kind of overlaps and connections with peacemaking, peace building. So some of these, things that I'll just sort of share, and much of this is drawing very much from the Crampe et al. Article. But climate change impacts peace building efforts. It can contribute to violence by amplifying grievances, insecurities, and resource competition by its impacts on, water, agriculture, other resources. It can undermine peace building by aggravating instabilities and fragilities, eroding local capacities, and adding to uncertainties. Fragile, conflict-affected places. There's research that shows that they are burdened by and vulnerable to climate change, so that they have both, trying to deal with both conflict and climate hazards in tandem. And so conflict undermines capacities in these places for adapting and mitigating climate change. And positive peace can create conditions that are conducive to adaptation and mitigation. So resilience building and peace building are interdependent. They can be mutually beneficial if coordinated well, but they can be detrimental if poorly implemented, poorly governed, poorly designed. An example of that would be, a project which is being put in place that may preferentially give access to, water or food resources or other resources to one or some groups, but exclude others, or having not consulted with folks as appropriately as needed to be, so that you can actually create more tensions, more grievances if you do this poorly. So that needs to be paid attention to. I was also interested to see in the Crampe et al. Paper an emphasis on bottom-up peace building, which very much resonates with bottom-up approaches to climate change adaptation, taking community-based approaches, bottom-up approaches. The notion here is, I think, very similar in both areas of work, that local actors, local institutions, voices, knowledge, experiences, participation, and ownership is critical to doing things that are going to be effective, that are going to address the actual needs in a community, and have buy-in and support, so that they can succeed. Another aspect that resonated with me is that well-functioning institutions, that they can adapt and protect vulnerable populations from climate hazards, and reduce the likelihood of conflict. So institutions emerge as very important. Yeah, I think with that, I will stop sharing my screen and we'll take some questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Leary, for your insightful presentation. We have actually two questions in the Q&A box. I just want to check with the participants who wrote in if it's okay for me to read out, or they prefer to express it by themselves by turning on the microphone and camera. Otherwise, I'll go on and share with Dr. Neil. Okay. Okay, so let me start from the first. I see a raised hand, but let me start with one of the questions from the Q&A box. The question here is, in what way has your work or institution's work has been affected by the current political situation, i.e. Climate change skepticism?
Yeah, so far, there's not been, direct impacts of the political situation in the United States on the work that we're doing on climate resilience. Um, that's because we're working at a local level. We're not using federal resources. When you're working locally, sometimes the divisions, the conflicts that are going on politically, you're a little bit more, kind of cushioned from some of that. Folks who live together oftentimes find, ways to work together. Also, part of this is those who, from the community who have chosen to engage in this work have come to it, with the sense that climate change is real, it's important, we need to deal with it. How are we going to do this work? So, we're not so much interacting with those in our community who may take very different views on that. So at this point, it has not been an issue. I think going forward, though, is to are we going to be able to access resources, that the kinds of support that, was potentially going to be available for trying to build resilient communities. In agriculture, that an important area of assistance comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, providing through their natural resource conservation services. They have field people in counties all over the United States who provide advice, support to farmers, rural communities on, cropping strategies, fertilizer strategies, managing runoff from your lands. So that kind of work is probably going to take a back seat in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. The other question that we have, uh, uh, Professor Dali is talking about how our representation is insightful for us at the Hiroshima University, and especially the programs on all resilience strategy uh, that you shared are extremely helpful in understanding the needs of the communities and how to partner with them. So the question here is, if you have experience with tensions with the community in terms of mismatched priorities, broadly speaking, and if yes, how did you resolve them? Yes. And actually, I had the same question in terms of consensus building. How do you go about it? If you can expand on how it happens. Thank you.
Yeah, so we haven't had too much in the way of tensions, in this work, and I think that's probably a function of, we're still kind of in the stages of assessing, learning, discussing, and so, where there are differences of opinions about what takes priority, it's in a context where we're not yet at the stage of making some choices about where and how to allocate resources. So I think, if and when we get to that point, I think this initial work will provide a good sort of foundation for being able to sort of navigate some of those differences. We have already seen, that there's a range of views about development and growth in the county. So participants in our process, there are those who are very concerned, worried about growth, particularly so these data centers that are likely to be built in our area. There are those who really are very much opposed to that, don't want to see that happen. Others who take the view that it is, inevitable, that we likely are not going, locally we don't really have the tools and abilities to prevent it from happening. What we can do is shape the ways in which it happens and whether we can negotiate some benefits for the community, and what sort of benefits should we negotiate for the community. So that's where we're going to see some differences there is what sort of limitations, guardrails should we be putting on new development? Can we make some, these data centers will have a large footprint in terms of water use and also in terms of how it affects stormwater runoff. And so can we, be, negotiating with the developers of these sites of, going beyond current ordinances and current requirements for managing stormwater runoff, for doing things to mitigate, how much water they're withdrawing. Like we're a very water-rich area, but when you look at the amount of water that data centers use, there's a lot of concern about where that's going to go. So I guess, you know, the general answer to the question is thus far the tensions have been mostly conceptual. And have not really gotten to the point where like, okay, let's get down to the brass tacks of what are we going to do with what resources, who's going to pay, who's going to benefit, how will these be distributed? And so when we get to that, I might call on folks at Hiroshima University for advice.
Okay, thank you so much. Questions from James Madison University as a Patterson that asks, how did the transfer of research you and your students did with your community leaders occur? And did you have a place at the Hazard Mitigation Plan Committee table? Or was it more like you submit it as a potential plan of action and little back and forth occurred?
Yeah, so we've been sharing our research all throughout this process in a variety of ways. Part of it has been workshops with participants from community members where we've shared some of our work as part of starting a conversation then about getting responses, reactions from members of the community, getting their input, getting their information and knowledge added to it. And then, the students then would, revise and update their papers based on that. The papers have been published on our website for the initiative, so they're available to the public. We get word out on that through a newsletter that has, as I said, about almost 400 people are subscribed to it. So that goes out to folks and seems to be getting read and being used by people. So those are, some of the ways that we've gotten the work out. I think part of the question was about with the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee. So I did not have a role on the committee, but I and students met a couple of times with staff in the county planning department as they were in the process of updating the plan. I think, part of the I think in the future it would be useful to have a more formal role there. That might be something to work towards in the future. At this point for this round, I think sort of admitting I and or my students into the process, I think would have been viewed as problematic as that wasn't something that was previously established as an authorized way for to bring in ideas, information to the process. So I think there was some concern about doing that. But I found the county planning staff we've got very good relationships with them, and that's been working very well for several years.
Okay, thank you. Let me read it out. So the question is, how can universities and local communities co-design and implement collaborative models that strengthen climate resilience to air pollution? So particularly about monitoring, awareness, and local mitigation actions.
Yeah, so air pollution, air quality is a significant concern where we are. I was a little surprised because it's a very rural agricultural area, but the geography where we've got Blue Mountain on our north and South Mountain on our south creates a situation where we can have air pollution kind of be held in the area for periods of time. We are a major hub for trucking, lots of interstates going through our area. So those are problems. And these are issues that have been of concern to people in the community for a while. There are other faculty at Dickinson who have been more engaged with community members on that specific issue. I'm aware of some of it, and I've been involved in some ways. There was, going back 20 years ago, an organization was created called the Central Pennsylvania Air Quality. Can't remember the full name of it, but the name of it makes it sound like it's an official government agency. In fact, it is a group that was created by about a half dozen or so churches, communities of faith, and Dickinson faculty members and folks from Shippensburg University and other educational institutions in the area. So there have been folks, coming together and working on this issue for some time. And, so I think that probably is an area in which it may be ripe for folks to think about co-designing with members of the community. What happens next? Where do we go to next? About 2 years ago, there was a study that came out that identified our area in Pennsylvania as one of the 10 most polluted areas in the United States for fine particulate matter. And I think that lots of folks here kind of knew we had some issues, but I think it shocked a lot of folks to see us ranked among the top 10 worst in the nation. And so I think there's, now would be a time to be thinking about how to bring together people in the community to work on designing something. But we already have this organization. It's called the Clean Air Board of Central Pennsylvania. That's the title of it. So it already exists. It's already has legitimacy as being a very much community-owned, community-driven organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And there is another question here about you mentioning that there are benefits to institutions, but this was learned, as you stated, the work. How did you get the buy-in from campus leadership on the front end of this work? Great question.
Yeah, so getting buy-in from the campus leadership was not hard at all. I mean, part of this is, my role at the college, which goes back, it's a little over 17 years now. The college launched an institution-wide initiative on sustainability and created a Center for Sustainability Education. They recruited me away from Professor Hassan Virji, who I don't know if he's in the audience. I know he was the instigator to get me invited for this, but so Dickinson College snatched me away from START International. And so there was already, the college has been doing a lot on sustainability. We've been ranked as the #1 four-year college in the United States for sustainability performance. We are carbon neutral, so we put a lot of resources into this. On the climate resilience piece, that was something which we've talked about doing something on for 6, 7, 8 years. The president we had back at that time had a lot of reservations, was unsure about moving forward on it. We finally moved forward on this as a result, as I mentioned, the faculty put forward a resolution that they voted on, passed it, basically asking the president of the college to take action and say, okay, adaptation alongside with mitigation is now going to be part of what we do, and we're going to sign on to this commitment with Second Nature. One of the advantages of joining with a commitment with Second Nature is this is now a public thing, right? It's not just a commitment that our president made that only our faculty, some of our students and alumni know about. This is out there in the public domain, right? And we are accountable, and we have to do reporting to Second Nature. And so, while we didn't have difficulty getting, college leadership in moving forward with starting the initiative, we probably will have some when it comes time to start thinking about, well, what are we actually going to do? All right. How are we going to protect our students, particularly, say, college athletes and young children who are at the Children's Center that's run by the college? How are we going to protect them from extreme heat events? That's going to take resources. We're going to have to invest in that. Will we continue to have that sort of buy-in from senior leadership? We'll have to see.
Okay, great. I ask again if we have some burning last questions from the audience. It was a great discussion, but if not, I would like to really thank Neil for coming to us, especially because it's a different time zone, totally different time zone. So we are very grateful for your availability to join us today. And I would like to also thank the attendance and participation of such a considerable number of audience. And yes, so that is the time to close our webinar. And for more information, please check our social media and other resources on the internet to know more, not only about this webinar, but about NERPS work. And thank you again.
And thank you for inviting me for this. I greatly appreciate it.